Right then, we've been talking about Los Angeles and the horrendous fires that are happening there. Some people, I promise you, including someone who's in Congress recently, a protester with that keffiyeh, that sort of pro-Palestinian protester with a pro-Palestinian scarf, basically, are linking the destruction of people's lives in Los Angeles to Gaza. I mean, this is just beyond the looking glass here, and we're just going to look at this bizarre video that's been posted online and then get reaction from Gary Mond, who's the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly. Let's have a look at this nonsense.
We just left the California Senate office of Alex Padilla, whose state is being ravaged by fires and the climate disaster. And at the same time, Congress is set to pass $8 billion more to Israel to continue to bomb and obliterate people in Gaza. We are drawing the parallels where people in communities in California are being evacuated from their homes, and people in Gaza have been evacuated from their homes for the past 15 months. Instead of funding more devastation and destruction, we need to be putting that money into constituents, whether they are from California, whether they are from Minnesota, Appalachia. Every bomb that goes off is being tested and built on sacrifice zones in this country, on indigenous lands. We need that money for climate reparations, for healthcare, for housing, instead of going to further climate collapse and further the devastation and genocide of the people in Gaza. And so we are here today making the connections between the climate crisis, between endless militarism, that genocide is ecocide, and that we need to put that money into constituents and communities here at home.
Genocide is ecocide, apparently. Gary Mond is the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly. First of all, it's not a genocide. It is factually not a genocide, what is happening in Gaza. Factually, that is wrong. Gary, what do you make of this clown?
Well, firstly, our hearts go out to the families of those who've lost their lives and who've been injured and who've been massively displaced by this absolute horrendous disaster in California. I think that has to be said to start with. But to actually link what's happened in California with what's going on in Israel is ludicrous. What is happening is there is a war going on where Israel is seeking to wipe out a terrorist organization that was initially responsible for murdering 1,250 people back on the 7th of October last year, and could easily bring an end to the war by simply surrendering and releasing all the hostages it holds. And the actual idea to make a comparison between the two is insanity. There's no other words for it. I should also add that you might have heard that former Cabinet Minister Michael Gove has actually, who's now the editor of The Spectator, has actually said that the Israel Defense Forces deserve to win a Nobel Peace Prize for their contribution to peace. And he's right.
I missed that one. That will certainly be another controversial statement from him. Very interesting. And I mean, I just wonder about the mentality of these people. I mean, people have just lost their minds over what's happening in Gaza, especially people who, I mean, it was a really, really interesting article. I expect you read it. In fact, we might have even had you on to comment about it by a reporter for The Times who talked about the attitudes of people in Gaza to Hamas and the fact that there's so many of them who really hate Hamas, who don't want Hamas to be in charge. But of course, that's not convenient for those lefty, tree-hugging, you know, ecocide, climate disaster, climate catastrophe people who linking all this together in this bizarre word soup like the person we just watched there.
Well, the attitude of people living in Gaza, I think, has changed over time. Sadly, back in October last year, Hamas was seen as winners, and they enjoyed massive support from the ordinary people of Gaza, many of whom were actually affiliated with Hamas. Over time, they've been seen to be doing less well and are now losing. And so those who are opposed to Hamas are starting to speak with louder voices. And of course, the only ultimate solution here is for Hamas to be removed and for all the people of Gaza, especially the younger people, to be properly educated so that they can in future live in peace with their neighbouring Israelis.
Gary, I wonder if I can ask you about the fact that the Metropolitan Police has actually used its powers under the Public Order Act to prevent the Palestine Solidarity Campaign forming its march in the vicinity of a synagogue. This is in central London, ahead of its planned protest on the 18th of January. Finally, the Metropolitan Police seems to have actually done something, and we both know, and everybody watching, listening to this programme who has a thought in their head will know that if the Palestine Solidarity Campaign starts its march outside a synagogue, there's going to be a trouble.
Yes, to my mind, this is one cheer out of three. Yes, it is good news that the march is going to be rerouted and that the Met are going to ensure that it is rerouted. And I would just say the Chief Rabbi and Claudia Mendoza at the Jewish Leadership Council have done a great job in that regard. But to get 3 cheers, we actually have to stop the marches altogether. They are simply anti-Semitic provocations. They're not campaigning for Palestine. They're campaigning against Jews. That's what it's been about since day one. And by the way, for 2 cheers, we could actually have some static demonstrations. That does preserve an element of freedom of speech, but actually reduces the risk still further. But to get 3 cheers, I want to see those marches stopped altogether.
Gary, have you got your copy of Jewish News this week?
I have read some elements of Jewish News. What are you referring to specifically?
Have you read a brilliant opinion piece by a young whippersnapper called Peter Cardwell?
I have to apologise to you.
There's a piece in Jewish News this week. Have a look in your copy about anti-Semitism in Ireland. It is absolutely disgraceful what's happened there. I'm sure you're aware of President Michael D. Higgins and the fact that he and the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister of Ireland, and the Foreign Affairs Minister, none of them put out anything to do with Hanukkah. They put it out for all sorts of different festivals on their social media. Nothing to do with Hanukkah. Ireland is probably, as you know far better than I do, one of the most pro-Palestinian countries in the world, and there is unfortunately so much anti-Semitism there. We've talked about it in this programme. But yes, I have an article in Jewish News, so you can have a look at that, Gary. But listen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Good to talk to you. That's Gary Mond there, Chairman of the National Jewish Assembly.